Hello, welcome back, and in this video I'll be talking about what's a memory leak. If you're building an app, your goal is to minimize the impact of memory leaks on the performance of the app. So we're going to be talking about what's a memory leak and how you can avoid it. So in summary, memory leak is anything that's in the memory of your computer that's not needed by the software that's using it, and it stays there and there's no way for it to get rid of, is basically something you would refer to as memory leak. In JavaScript, there is a concept called garbage collection. Anything that's not needed gets garbage collected. The way JavaScript determines if something is not needed is by looking at if anything is referring to it. If anything that exists and that is referring to something, that something will remain in the memory. It will be accessible to that variable. So I'm looking at this article. It talks about few types of leaks in JavaScript. One is you accidentally um, forget to declare variable as a scope variable and don't type like var console line and declare variable like so. What this does is it creates a global variable, and when your function returns, you're thinking, oh, this is done, and it's not. When this function returns, the variable still exists, but it exists on window object or global scope. And this is essentially a leak because this variable is no longer needed outside of this function, yet it exists as taking up space in memory of your computer. The second type here that it talks about is uh, callbacks and timers. So, for example, you call a set interval to do something and you forget about it. That's pretty obvious. I mean, if you call an interval, you gotta be keeping in mind that it's gonna be running in the background forever until you reference to it and cancel it, like stop this interval. Manually set interval, you have to stop it manually. I think this one is the most important one. That's just not like obvious. The out of context DOM element. So when you're building in a sort of interactive website, what do you have? You're adding and deleting DOM elements manually. Maybe not so much so if you're using a framework like React or Angular. But if you're doing anything custom, there's a good chance that you're gonna be modifying DOM a lot. Like when I'm saying DOM, I mean HTML structure of the HTML document, like elements. So what happens is like you create you save like references to the DOM elements into the variables. Then you delete those DOM elements, like you have to replace it with something else, a new page showed up and so on. But what ends up happening is that since you referred to it by a object, by a variable inside JavaScript, the browser will not forget about those DOM elements. They will still be accessible. And even though you're not using those DOM elements, maybe you even created them again using different code. But if somewhere in your code you have written code such that variables are not garbage collected, then anything that they are referring to still will not get garbage collected either. So for example here, this will make sure that the elements these is gonna select are gonna remain always gonna remain into the memory of the browser, and they will not get like garbage collected until you explicitly call delete on them, like delete elements dot button, like so. Closures and scopes is pretty much the same concept. Closure basically allows you to refer to the elements, refer to the variables in the scope that no longer exist, but only the things you have referred to and all the things that those refer to will continue to exist. I mean, if you understand Clojure, you already know this pretty good. You can debug your application. All you have to do is go to your Chrome DevTools timeline and start recording, and just interact with your application for a while. If you see this memory line going up, 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 and this means then there's a memory leak. There are a lot of videos you can Google on YouTube or search on YouTube. They'll tell you how to find if your application has a memory leak. So that's pretty much it for this video. And again, just to give you the summary, anything that's not being used by the application or your code, and it's referred, it will continue to exist and will continue to fill up the RAM, and this will slow down your user's computer and your app and all the other apps. So the point is, you have to code in a way that anything you can create, you want to delete it if it's not needed, like callbacks, events, reference to DOM elements and such. And that's it. Hopefully you have a good time. Thanks.